The morning sun cast long shadows across the Quantico Marine Base firing range as Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his scope for the third time. 23 years of service, 2 tours in Afghanistan, and a drawer full of marksmanship. Ribbons hadn't prepared him for what was about to unfold. Behind him, 5 of his best Marines waited their turn, each one a proven sharpshooter who'd earned their place through countless hours of training and real-world experience. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Gentlemen, I want you to meet Dorothy Patterson, announced Range Master Chief William Hayes, gesturing toward the small figure approaching from the parking lot. She moved with deliberate steps, her silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, carrying what appeared to be a well-worn rifle case that had seen decades of use. At 78 years old, Dorothy stood barely 5 feet tall, her weathered hands steady despite her age, and her pale blue eyes held a clarity that made even the seasoned Marines take notice. "Ma'am," Rodriguez nodded respectfully though. Confusion flickered across his face. "Are you here for the civilian orientation program?" Dorothy's lips curved into a knowing smile as she set down her case with practiced ease. "Not exactly, Sergeant. I'm here for the challenge your unit posted on the base bulletin board. Something about finding the best marksman on Quantico." She began unlocking her case with movements that spoke of decades of familiarity. "I figured it was time someone showed you boys how it's really done." The Marines exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of amusement and bewilderment. Corporal James Mitchell, a 24-year-old from Texas who'd won the Eastern Division rifle competition just months earlier, couldn't suppress a chuckle. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this is a military precision shooting event. We've got Marines here who've been training for years." Dorothy pulled out a custom-built rifle that immediately commanded attention. The weapon was pristine, its modifications clearly the work of someone who understood both the mechanics and the art of precision shooting. "This old girl and I have been together for 43 years, she said, running her fingers along the stock. "Built her myself back in '82. She's taken more games than you've probably seen rounds, son." Staff Sergeant Kevin Thompson, a veteran of 3 deployments, stepped forward with genuine interest. "That's beautiful work, ma'am. Custom barrel?" "Match grade, hand-lapped. Trigger's been worked down to 2 pounds, glass-bedded action, and I've loaded every round she's ever fired." Dorothy's voice carried the confidence of someone who'd spent a lifetime perfecting her craft. "My late husband used to say I was more particular about my ammunition than most women are about their jewelry." The Range Master Chief cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "All right, since we've got an unexpected challenger, let's make this interesting. We'll run 3 stages today. First stage is precision shooting at known distances. Second is unknown distance with time constraints. And third is a stress shoot with position changes and moving targets." He paused, looking directly at Dorothy. "Ma'am, I have to ask, when's the last time you shot competitively?" Dorothy's smile widened as she began setting up her shooting mat with methodical precision. "Last weekend at the Virginia State Championships. Took first place in the Grand Senior Division and 3rd overall." She glanced up at the stunned faces surrounding her. "Before that, I spent 35 years teaching high school chemistry and running the rifle team. We won state championships 7 times." The revelation sent a ripple of nervous energy through the Marine unit. Rodriguez felt his confidence waver slightly as he watched Dorothy's setup routine. Every movement was economical, purposeful. The behavior of someone who'd done this thousands of times before. "Well then," announced Lance Corporal David Chen, the unit's youngest member at 19, "I guess we'd better bring our A-game." Dorothy looked up from her prone position, her eyes already aligned with her scope. "Son, you'd better bring more than that." The first stage began with targets at 300, 500, and 700 yards. Standard military-issue targets that every Marine had. Engaged hundreds of times during training. Rodriguez went first, his shots grouping well within the scoring rings, earning nods of approval from his fellow Marines. Mitchell followed with an impressive display that showcased why he'd won the divisional competition. Thompson Chun and the remaining 2 Marines, Sergeant First Class Robert Davis and Corporal Anthony Williams, each delivered solid performances that would have been competitive in any military shooting event. Then came Dorothy's turn. She approached the firing line with the same calm demeanor she'd maintained throughout the morning. Her pre-shot routine was unlike anything the Marines had witnessed, a series of controlled breathing exercises, followed by a moment of absolute stillness that seemed to settle over her like a blanket. When she finally squeezed the trigger, the sound seemed different somehow, more precise, as if the rifle itself knew it was in the hands of a master. The spotting scope revealed the truth that would haunt the Marines for weeks to come. Dorothy's first shot had found the exact center of the 300-yard target, creating a hole so perfectly placed it looked like it had been drilled by a machine. Her second shot, at 500 yards, duplicated the feat. The third shot, at the challenging 700-yard distance, was perhaps even more impressive. A bullseye so precise that it would have been difficult to improve upon with unlimited attempts. "Jesus," whispered Chun, his voice barely audible above the range's ambient noise. Dorothy stood up slowly, her joints protesting the movement, but her expression remained unchanged. "Arthritis is a real problem at my age," she said matter-of-factly, as if she hadn't just delivered a shooting performance that would be talked about for years. "I have to adjust for the stiffness in my trigger finger." The second stage introduced unknown distances and time pressure, elements designed to test not just marksmanship, but tactical thinking and adaptability. The Marines would have to estimate ranges, account for wind conditions, and engage multiple targets within strict time limits. It was the kind of challenge that separated good shooters from great ones, and the kind of scenario that played directly into military training advantages. Rodriguez felt more confident as he approached this stage. Range estimation was drilled into Marines from their earliest training, and the time pressure element was something they faced regularly in both training and combat scenarios. Surely this was where their military experience would provide the decisive advantage. Dorothy, meanwhile, seemed to be engaging in a different kind of preparation. Instead of the hurried calculations and frantic adjustments the Marines employed, she simply stood quietly, her eyes moving methodically across the range as if she were reading a familiar book. When the timer started, her movements were unhurried, almost leisurely, yet each shot found its mark with devastating accuracy. The Marines watched in growing amazement as Dorothy engaged targets at distances they were still trying to calculate. Her decades of experience had taught her to read environmental conditions instinctively, to recognize the subtle signs that indicated wind speed and direction, to judge distances with an accuracy that came from years of hunting in varied terrain. "How is she doing that?" Davis asked, his voice filled with genuine admiration rather than frustration. "She's not even using a rangefinder." Thompson, who'd been studying Dorothy's technique intently, shook his head in wonder. "She doesn't need one. Look at how she's reading the mirage, the way she's accounting for the wind drift. She's been doing this longer than we've been alive." The realization was settling over the unit like a slow dawn. This wasn't just a skilled civilian shooter who'd gotten lucky. This was a master craftsperson demonstrating decades of accumulated knowledge and experience. Dorothy Patterson wasn't just competing with them. She was schooling them in the finer points of precision shooting. As the morning progressed, the gap between Dorothy's performance and that of the Marines continued to widen. Each stage revealed new aspects of her expertise, from her ability to read environmental conditions to her understanding of ballistics that went far beyond what most military marksmen ever encountered. The Marines found themselves not just being defeated, but being educated in the process. That the transformation in their attitudes was remarkable to witness. What had begun as polite skepticism had evolved into genuine respect, and finally into something approaching awe. These were men who dedicated their lives to military excellence, yet they were witnessing a level of shooting skill that transcended their training and experience. The third stage promised to be the most challenging yet. A stress shoot that would test not just accuracy, but adaptability under pressure. The course was designed around a series of barriers and obstacles that required shooters to engage targets from multiple positions while navigating physical challenges. For younger Marines accustomed to combat scenarios, this should have been their moment to shine. Rangemaster Chief Hayes outlined the course with military precision. 6 shooting positions, each with different target presentations. You'll have barricade work, elevated shots from a platform, low crawl under wire, and finishing with rapid engagement from a supported prone position. The total time limit is 8 minutes. Miss your target, and you add a 30-second penalty. Corporal Williams, built like a linebacker and known for his aggressive shooting style, cracked his knuckles with confidence. "Ma'am, this is where youth and Marine Corps training really pays off. No offense, but this course is designed for combat fitness." Dorothy examined the course layout with the same methodical attention she'd given everything else that morning. Her assessment was thorough but unhurried, taking note of sightlines, potential stability points, and the most efficient movement patterns. "Anthony, is it?" she asked, remembering his name from the earlier introductions. "I appreciate your concern, but I've been crawling through brush after wounded deer since before you were born. The principles don't change much." The Marines went first, each attacking the course with the aggressive efficiency their training had instilled. Rodriguez demonstrated textbook form, his movements crisp and professional as he navigated each obstacle. His shooting was solid, though the time pressure clearly affected his usual precision. Mitchell followed with a more athletic approach, using his natural agility to move quickly between positions, though his shots showed the slight tremor that comes with elevated heart rate. Thompson's run was perhaps the most impressive of the Marines, combining steady marksmanship with tactical movement that spoke to his combat experience. Chun, despite his youth, struggled with the physical demands of the course, his shots becoming increasingly erratic as fatigue set in. Davis and Williams both delivered competent performances, though neither managed to overcome the psychological pressure that seemed to intensify with each passing minute. Then Dorothy stepped to the starting line. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." What followed was a masterclass in efficiency and economy of movement. Where the Marines had attacked the course with brute force, Dorothy approached it like a chess problem to be solved. Her movements between positions were deliberate rather than rushed, conserving energy while maintaining the precise timing needed to avoid penalties. At the first barricade, she demonstrated a shooting technique that left the Marines speechless. Instead of the aggressive stance they'd all employed, Dorothy used her smaller stature to her advantage, finding natural support points and body positions that the larger men had overlooked. Her shots were delivered with the same methodical precision she'd shown all morning, each one finding its mark with devastating accuracy. The elevated platform, which had given several Marines trouble due to its awkward height and limited space, seemed designed for Dorothy's approach. She positioned herself with an economy of movement that spoke to decades of experience in confined spaces, her shots ringing out with mechanical regularity. "Look at her breathing," whispered Davis, his voice filled with professional admiration. "She's not even winded." It was true. While the Marines had attacked the course with the intensity their training demanded, Dorothy had found a rhythm that allowed her to maintain her composure throughout. Her heart rate remained steady, her breathing controlled, and her shooting remained as precise as it had been during the static exercises. The low crawl section, which had been the most physically demanding for the Marines, revealed another aspect of Dorothy's unexpected skill set. Her movements were fluid and practiced, keeping her rifle clean and ready while navigating the obstacle with surprising speed. Years of hunting in difficult terrain had taught her how to move efficiently in confined spaces while maintaining weapon readiness. Where did she learn to do that? Chun asked, genuinely bewildered. Hayes, who'd been observing Dorothy's technique with growing fascination, provided the answer. 43 years of hunting everything from prairie dogs to elk. She's been shooting from unconventional positions since most of us were in diapers. The final position brought Dorothy to the supported prone stance that should have been familiar territory for any military marksman. The Marines had all performed well from this position, their training evident in their solid fundamentals and consistent shot placement. But Dorothy's approach revealed subtleties that even experienced shooters had never considered. Her positioning was perfect, but beyond that, she'd found micro-adjustments that optimized her natural point of aim in ways that military training manuals never addressed. Her shots came in a steady rhythm that spoke to complete mastery of her weapon system, each round finding its mark with the inevitability of a perfectly calibrated machine. When the timer stopped, Dorothy stood slowly, her joints protesting the movement but her expression unchanged. The target downrange told the story that numbers would later confirm. She'd achieved perfect scores while completing the course in a time that would have been respectable for Marines half her age. Silence that followed was profound. These were men who'd dedicated their lives to military excellence, who'd trained under some of the finest instructors in the world, yet they'd just witnessed a shooting performance that transcended anything in their experience. Rodriguez was the first to speak, his voice carrying a mixture of amazement and respect. "Ma'am, I've been shooting competitively for 15 years. I've never seen anything like what you just did." Dorothy began cleaning her rifle with the same methodical attention she'd shown throughout the morning. "Marcus, shooting isn't about strength or speed. It's about understanding your weapon, reading conditions, and maintaining consistency under pressure. Those are skills that improve with age and experience, not decline." The conversation that followed revealed the depth of Dorothy's expertise in ways that surprised even her. She spoke about ballistics with the precision of an engineer, discussed environmental factors with the knowledge of a meteorologist, and analyzed shooting techniques with the insight of someone who'd spent decades studying the art of precision marksmanship. "I started shooting when I was 12, she explained, her voice taking on the cadence of someone sharing a cherished memory. "My father was a competitive shooter, and he taught me that precision is about more than just hitting the target. It's about understanding every variable that affects your shot, from the temperature of your barrel to the moisture content of the air." Thompson leaned forward, genuinely interested. "Is that why you load your own ammunition?" "Consistency is everything." "In precision shooting," Dorothy replied, her hands never stopping their methodical cleaning routine. "Factory ammunition is good enough for most purposes, but when you're trying to achieve the kind of accuracy we demonstrated today, you need to control every variable. I know the exact powder charge, bullet weight, and seating depth for every round I fire." The Marines found themselves drawn into a conversation that was part technical discussion, part shooting lesson, and part life philosophy. Dorothy's knowledge extended far beyond basic marksmanship into areas that most military shooters never explored: the physics of bullet flight, the psychology of competition shooting, and the subtle art of reading environmental conditions. That could only be learned through decades of experience. "The military teaches you to be effective shooters," she continued, her tone respectful but instructive. "But effectiveness and precision are different things. Military shooting is about hitting your target under combat conditions. Competition shooting is about hitting the exact spot you're aiming for every single time." Davis asked the question that was on everyone's mind. How do you maintain that level of precision at 78? I mean eyesight, hand steadiness, physical condition. Doesn't age affect your shooting? Dorothy's smile was gentle but knowing. Age affects everything, David, but it also teaches you to compensate for limitations in ways that youth never considers. My eyesight isn't what it was, but my understanding of optics is better than it's ever been. My hands aren't as steady, but my shooting positions are more solid because I've learned to use support more effectively. The morning's competition had evolved into something unexpected, a masterclass in precision, shooting delivered by someone who'd spent a lifetime perfecting her craft. The Marines found themselves not just defeated, but educated in ways their formal training had never addressed. As the formal competition concluded, an unexpected request emerged from the group. Chun, still processing what he'd witnessed, approached Dorothy with genuine curiosity. "Ma'am, would you be willing to show us some of the techniques you've developed over the years? I mean, if you have time." Dorothy's face lit up with the enthusiasm of a natural teacher. "I'd be delighted. But first, let me ask you something. What do you think is the most important factor in precision shooting?" The Marines exchanged glances, each drawing on their training and experience. Rodriguez spoke first. "Sight alignment and trigger control. That's what they drill into us from day one." "Breathing technique," added Mitchell. "You can't shoot accurately if you're not controlling your respiratory cycle." Thompson nodded toward Dorothy's rifle. "Equipment consistency. Having a weapon system you can trust completely." Dorothy listened thoughtfully to each response, her expression suggesting she was evaluating not just their answers, but their understanding of the underlying principles. All excellent points, and all absolutely correct within their context. But you're thinking like soldiers, focusing on the mechanical aspects of shooting. Let me show you something different. She led them to a bench rest setup that hadn't been used during the competition. This is about understanding your natural shooting rhythm. Every person has a biological clock that affects their precision. Heart rate, breathing pattern, even the natural tremor in your hands. Military training teaches you to override these factors, but competitive shooting teaches you to work with them. Dorothy positioned herself behind her rifle, but instead of immediately taking aim, she spent several minutes simply observing. Her breathing was controlled but natural, her posture relaxed yet purposeful. "Watch my trigger finger," she instructed. "I'm not fighting against my natural tremor. I'm timing my shot to coincide with the stillest point in my natural cycle." The demonstration that followed was unlike anything the Marines had seen. Dorothy's shooting technique incorporated elements that military training rarely addressed: the subtle timing of physiological rhythms, the psychological preparation that preceded each shot, and the almost meditative focus that allowed her to maintain consistency across multiple targets. "This is why age can actually improve shooting performance," she explained, her voice taking on the cadence of someone who'd spent decades teaching. "Young shooters often try to force accuracy through strength and aggression. Older shooters learn to achieve accuracy through patience and understanding." Williams, who'd been quiet since his own performance on the stress course, stepped forward with a question that had been bothering him. "Mrs. Patterson, how do you deal with the pressure? I mean, when you're competing against people half your age, doesn't that create additional stress?" Dorothy's laugh was warm and genuine. "Anthony, I've been dealing with skepticism about my shooting for 43 years. When I started competitive shooting, most ranges didn't even allow women members. I learned early that the best response to doubt is consistent performance." She began setting up targets at distances that challenged even the Marines' comfort zone. "Let me tell you about my first state championship. I was 47 years old, competing against men who'd been shooting competitively since college. The match director actually suggested I might be more comfortable in the ladies' auxiliary category." The story that followed revealed a side of Dorothy that the morning's competition had only hinted at. Her path to mastery hadn't been smooth or easy. It had been earned through decades of perseverance against skepticism, technical challenges, and the physical demands of a sport that traditionally favored younger competitors. I finished third. That year, she continued, checking her scope adjustments with practiced efficiency. But more importantly, I learned that shooting isn't about competing against others. It's about competing against your own limitations. Davis asked about her practice routine, genuinely curious about how someone maintained such skill into their 70s. Dorothy's response revealed a dedication that impressed even these disciplined Marines. I shoot every day that weather permits. Not hundreds of rounds. That's wasteful and doesn't improve precision. But I fire at least 20. Carefully planned shots, each one designed to address a specific aspect of my technique. I keep detailed logs of every shot, tracking environmental conditions, ammunition performance, and my own physical state. She pulled out a worn notebook filled with meticulous handwriting. This is 43 years of shooting data. Temperature, humidity, wind speed, ammunition lot numbers, target distances, and shot placement for every significant shooting session I've had. The Marines passed the notebook among themselves, amazed by the level of detail Dorothy had maintained. Each entry was precise, scientific, and revealed an analytical approach to shooting that went far beyond what most competitors ever attempted. "This is incredible," Rodriguez murmured, studying entries from decades past. "You've been tracking performance variables since before computers were common." "Consistency requires data," Dorothy replied simply. "You can't improve what you don't measure. Every shot teaches you something if you're paying attention." Chun discovered an entry from the previous month that caught his attention. "Mrs. Patterson, you shot a perfect score at 1,200 yards in 30-mile-per-hour winds. How is that even possible?" Dorothy's expression became more serious as she considered the question. "That particular shot taught me something important about the limits of precision shooting. Perfect scores don't always mean perfect shooting. Sometimes they mean perfect adaptation to imperfect conditions." She began explaining wind reading techniques that went far beyond military training. Her understanding of atmospheric conditions, bullet flight characteristics, and environmental factors was encyclopedic. She could discuss the effects of temperature on powder burn rates, the impact of altitude on bullet trajectory, and the subtle ways that humidity affected both bullet flight and scope clarity. "Military shooting focuses on first-round effectiveness," she explained. "Competition shooting focuses on absolute precision. Both are valuable, but they require different approaches." Thompson asked about her equipment maintenance routine, noting the pristine condition of her rifle despite its obvious age. Dorothy's response revealed another aspect of her meticulous approach to shooting. "This rifle has fired over 50,000 rounds," she said, running her hand along the stock with obvious affection. "But it's been cleaned after every shooting session, properly stored, and maintained according to a schedule I've refined over decades. The barrel has been replaced twice, the trigger has been rebuilt 4 times, and I've upgraded the scope 3 times as technology improved." Mitchell was fascinated by the technical aspects of her equipment. "What modifications have you made beyond the standard setup?" Dorothy's explanation revealed a deep understanding of rifle mechanics that impressed even these technically trained Marines. She'd customized everything from the stock dimensions to the trigger weight, each modification based on her specific physical characteristics and shooting style. "Most shooters try to adapt themselves to their equipment," she explained. "But precision shooting requires equipment that's adapted to the shooter. This rifle fits me perfectly because I've spent 43 years making it fit me perfectly." The conversation shifted to competitive shooting psychology, an area where Dorothy's experience was particularly valuable. She discussed the mental preparation required for high-level competition, the techniques for maintaining focus during long matches, and the strategies for dealing with equipment failures or unexpected conditions. Competitive shooting is 90% mental, she stated. The physical skills are important, but they're relatively easy to learn. The mental skills, concentration, confidence, adaptability, those take years to develop. Hayes, who'd been observing the entire exchange with growing fascination, asked about Dorothy's plans for the future. Her response revealed an enthusiasm for shooting that hadn't diminished despite her age. "I'm registered for the national championships next month," she said matter-of-factly. "At 78, I'm finally old enough to compete in the Grand Senior Division without handicap. I'm looking forward to seeing what I can accomplish when I'm only competing against shooters my own age." The Marines laughed at her competitive spirit, but they also recognized the determination that had driven her to such excellence. Dorothy Patterson wasn't just a skilled shooter. She was a master craftsperson who'd spent a lifetime perfecting her art. As the afternoon session concluded, the Marines found themselves fundamentally changed by the experience. They'd arrived that morning as confident military marksmen, secure in their skills and training. They were leaving as students, humbled by an encounter with true mastery and inspired by the possibility of achieving such excellence themselves. The afternoon sun was beginning to cast longer shadows across the range when Dorothy made an unexpected proposal. "Gentlemen, I'd like to show you something that might change how you think about shooting entirely. But it requires a different kind of target system." Hayes raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the mysterious nature of her request. "What did you have in mind, Mrs. Patterson?" "Reactive targets at unknown distances. No spotting scopes, no range cards, no predetermined sight adjustments. Just pure shooting instinct and environmental reading." Dorothy gestured toward a section of the range that extended into natural terrain. The kind of shooting that separates marksmen from true shooters. The Marines exchanged glances, their competitive spirits immediately rekindled. Rodriguez stepped forward, his voice carrying the challenge that had been building throughout the day. "Ma'am, that sounds like field shooting. That's where military training should give us a significant advantage." Dorothy's smile was enigmatic as she began unpacking additional equipment from her case. "Marcus, military training teaches you to engage known targets at predetermined ranges with established firing solutions. What I'm proposing is pure shooting, reading conditions, estimating distances, and engaging targets based entirely on experience and instinct." What emerged from her equipment case surprised everyone. Instead of the precision rifle she'd used all morning, Dorothy produced a completely different weapon, a lever-action rifle that appeared to be several decades old. The blued steel showed honest wear, and the wood stock bore the patina of countless hunts. "This is my grandfather's Winchester," she explained, working the action with smooth familiarity. "Built in 1952, and it's taken more game animals than most hunters see in a lifetime. No fancy optics, no adjustable anything. Just iron sights and 73 years of proven reliability." Chun stared at the rifle in amazement. "Ma'am, you're going to shoot reactive targets at unknown distances with iron sights? Against Marines using military precision weapons? David, this is how shooting was done before rangefinders and ballistic computers, before adjustable turrets and precise measurements. This is shooting the way it was meant to be done, by feel, experience, and understanding your weapon intimately." The challenge that followed would become legendary among the Marines. Who witnessed it? Dorothy had identified several steel targets positioned throughout the natural terrain at distances ranging from 200 to 600 yards. The catch was that none of the distances were marked, the targets were partially concealed by vegetation, and the shooting positions offered no artificial support. "Rules are simple," Dorothy announced, shouldering the lever-action rifle with practiced ease. "One shot per target, engage them in any order you choose, and you can't move from your initial firing position. Miss a target, and you're eliminated." Thompson, studied the target array through his scope, trying to calculate ranges and wind conditions. This is impossible. We can't even see some of those targets clearly, let alone judge distance accurately enough for first-round hits. Dorothy had already identified her first target, a steel plate barely visible through a gap in the trees at what appeared to be approximately 350 yards. Her preparation was unlike anything the Marines had seen. Instead of mechanical adjustments and calculated holds, she seemed to be reading the environment like a familiar book. "Wind is quartering from the left at about 12 miles per hour, she announced, her voice carrying the confidence of someone stating an obvious fact. "Temperature is dropping as the sun gets lower, so my point of impact will be slightly high. That target is approximately 340 yards, which means I need to hold about 8 inches high and 4 inches left." The shot that followed was delivered with the casual precision of someone performing a routine task. The distant ring of steel on steel confirmed what the Marines were beginning to expect. Dorothy had scored a perfect hit on her first attempt. "How did you do that?" Williams asked, his voice filled with genuine amazement. "You made those calculations in about 10 seconds. Dorothy worked the lever action, chambering a fresh round with smooth efficiency. "Anthony, I've been reading wind and estimating distances for 43 years. After a while, it becomes as automatic as driving a car. You don't consciously think about every adjustment, you just know." The Marines took their turns, each struggling with the challenges of unknown distance shooting. Their precision weapons, so effective during the morning's structured competition, seemed less advantageous when faced with the uncertainties of field shooting. Range estimation became guesswork, wind reading became approximate, and the pressure of one-shot eliminations affected their usual accuracy. Rodriguez managed to connect with 2 targets before missing his third attempt. Mitchell, despite his competitive success, struggled with the environmental reading required for accurate shooting. Thompson's combat experience helped him connect with 3 targets, but his 4th shot missed due to a wind miscalculation. Dorothy, meanwhile, was delivering a clinic at instinctive shooting. Her lever-action rifle spoke with mechanical regularity, each shot followed by the satisfying ring of steel. She engaged targets in an order that seemed random to the observers, but was actually based on wind conditions and lighting factors that only she could read. "There's a science to this," she explained between shots, her voice carrying the enthusiasm of someone sharing a passion. "But it's not the kind of science you learn in books. It's the science of accumulated experience, of understanding how bullets behave in different conditions." Davis was fascinated by her target selection process. "Mrs. Patterson, how do you decide which target to engage next?" "Environmental factors are constantly changing," Dorothy replied, identifying her next target through the iron sights. "Wind shifts, light conditions evolve, even the temperature changes affect bullet flight. I'm engaging targets in the order that gives me the best chance of success based on current conditions." Her next shot demonstrated the principle perfectly. She'd selected a target that appeared to be in full sunlight, but as she prepared to shoot, a cloud passed overhead, changing the lighting conditions. Without hesitation, she shifted to a different target, one that would be unaffected by the lighting change. "Adaptability is everything in field shooting," she continued, scoring another perfect hit. "You can't force shots in changing conditions. You have to work with the environment, not against it." Shun attempted to apply Dorothy's principles to his own shooting, but found himself overwhelmed by the variables involved. "There's too much to consider," he said, frustration evident in his voice. "Distance, wind, lighting, target size, ammunition performance. How do you process all of that simultaneously?" Dorothy's response revealed the depth of experience that separated her from even skilled shooters. "David, you're trying to consciously process information that should be automatic. When you learned to drive, you had to think about every movement, check mirrors, signal, brake, accelerate. But now you do it without conscious thought. Shooting is the same way. She engaged another target, this one partially obscured by brush, at an estimated 280 yards. The shot was delivered with the same casual precision she'd demonstrated all day, but her explanation revealed the complex calculations happening instinctively. I could see about 60% of that target through the vegetation. The wind was gusty, but I timed my shot for a lull. The range was shorter than my previous shots, so I adjusted my hold accordingly. All of that happened automatically, based on decades of similar shots. Hayes, who'd been observing Dorothy's technique with professional interest, asked about her ammunition selection for the lever-action rifle. Her response demonstrated yet another aspect of her comprehensive approach to shooting. "This rifle has been shooting the same load for 23 years, she explained, working the action to chamber another round. 165-grain bullets at 2,650 feet per second. I know exactly how this combination performs at every distance, in every weather condition, from every shooting position." The conversation revealed that Dorothy had developed load data not just for her precision rifle, but for every weapon she owned. Her understanding of ballistics extended to multiple calibers, bullet weights and powder charges, each optimized for specific shooting applications. "Most shooters try to make their ammunition do everything," she continued, scoring another hit on a distant target. "But precision shooting requires specialized loads for specialized applications. This hunting load is perfect for field shooting at moderate ranges, but it's completely different from what I use for long-range competition." Mitchell asked about her training routine for field shooting, curious about how she maintained such skills without access to formal training programs. Dorothy's response revealed a training philosophy that emphasized quality over quantity. "I don't practice field shooting in the traditional sense," she explained. "I hunt. Every hunting season, I take shots at game animals under real-world conditions. The pressure of knowing you only get one chance, the variability of weather and lighting, the unpredictability of animal behavior, that's the best training for field shooting you can get." As Dorothy continued her demonstration, engaging targets with mechanical precision, the Marines began to understand that they were witnessing something truly exceptional. This wasn't just skilled shooting. It was the culmination of a lifetime dedicated to understanding every aspect of marksmanship. As Dorothy completed her final shot in the field shooting demonstration, hitting every target with devastating accuracy, the atmosphere on the range had transformed completely. What began as polite accommodation of an elderly civilian had evolved into something approaching reverence. The Marines found themselves in the presence of someone whose skills transcended their understanding of what was possible in shooting. "Sports. Gentlemen," Hayes announced, his voice carrying a formality that signaled the importance of what he was about to say. "In 32 years of military service, I've witnessed some exceptional shooting. But what we've seen today represents a level of mastery that deserves special recognition." Dorothy was cleaning her grandfather's Winchester with the same meticulous attention she'd shown her precision rifle, seemingly unaware of the profound impact her demonstration had made. "Range Master Chief, you're very kind, but I'm just an old woman who spent her life doing something she loves." Rodriguez stepped forward, his demeanor having shifted from competitive Marine to respectful student. "Ma'am, with your permission, I'd like to ask about something that's been bothering me all day. How do you maintain such consistency across different weapons, different shooting positions, and different conditions?" The question touched on something fundamental that had impressed the Marines throughout the day. Dorothy's performance hadn't just been excellent. It had been remarkably consistent regardless of the challenges presented. Her answer revealed a shooting philosophy that was both simple and profound. "Marcus, consistency comes from understanding that every shot is the same shot," she began, her voice taking on the instructional tone that came naturally to someone who'd spent decades teaching. "The variables change, distance, wind, weapon, position, but the fundamentals remain constant. Sight alignment, trigger control, breathing, follow through. Master those elements, and you can adapt to any shooting situation. Thompson leaned forward, genuinely interested in understanding the principles behind Dorothy's success. But how do you account for all the variables so quickly? The calculations you're making seem impossibly complex. Dorothy's laugh was warm and knowing. Kevin, you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. When you drive your car, do you consciously calculate the pressure needed on the brake pedal to stop at exactly the right spot? Do you measure the steering wheel angle required to navigate a turn? The analogy was illuminating. Chun nodded slowly as understanding dawned. It becomes automatic through repetition and experience. Exactly, Dorothy confirmed. After 43 years, reading wind conditions is as automatic as sensing when your car needs to shift gears. Estimating distances is as natural as judging how much space you need to parallel park. The calculations are still happening, but they're happening at a subconscious level. Williams asked about her mental preparation routine, curious about the psychological aspects of her shooting. Dorothy's response revealed another dimension of her comprehensive approach to marksmanship. Mental preparation begins long before you arrive at the range, she explained. It starts with proper rest, adequate nutrition, and the right mindset. But most importantly, it requires absolute confidence in your equipment and your abilities. She gestured toward her rifles, both now cleaned and secured in their cases. I know exactly what these weapons will do under any conditions, because I've tested them thoroughly. I know my own capabilities and limitations, because I've pushed them in competition and hunting situations. That knowledge eliminates doubt, and doubt is the enemy of precision shooting. Davis was intrigued by her mention of hunting as training. Mrs. Patterson, how has hunting influenced your competitive shooting? Most people see them as completely different activities. Dorothy's eyes lit up with the enthusiasm of someone discussing a favorite topic. Robert, hunting is the ultimate test of field shooting skills. In competition, you shoot at known targets under controlled conditions. In hunting, you're dealing with live animals that won't wait for perfect conditions. She began describing hunting scenarios that had tested her skills in ways that formal competition never could. Shots at game animals in heavy timber were precise. Range estimation meant the difference between a clean kill and a wounded animal. Opportunities that appeared suddenly and disappeared just as quickly, requiring instant assessment and execution. I once had a shot at a bull elk in Montana, she recounted, her voice carrying the weight of memory. 700 yards across a canyon, 30-mile-per-hour crosswind, and about 15 seconds before he disappeared into thick timber. No rangefinder, no time for calculations, just instinct and experience. Mitchell was fascinated by the scenario. How do you make that shot? I mean, with all those variables and no time to prepare. You don't make that shot, Dorothy replied with a smile. You've already made it 1,000 times in practice and 100 times in similar hunting situations. When the moment comes, you're not learning, you're just executing skills you've already mastered. The conversation shifted to equipment. Philosophy, something that had intrigued the Marines throughout the day. Dorothy's approach to weapon selection and modification was markedly different from military thinking. Focused on optimization rather than standardization, military equipment is designed for reliability and versatility, she explained. It has to work for every Marine in every situation. Competitive equipment is designed for maximum performance in specific applications. Both approaches are valid, but they serve different purposes. Hayes asked about her decision to use iron sights on the Leva action rifle, noting that most modern shooters relied heavily on optical sights. Dorothy's response revealed a shooting philosophy that valued fundamental skills over technological advantages. Optics are tools that can enhance your shooting, she said, but they can also become crutches that mask fundamental weaknesses. Iron. Sights force you to master the basics: proper sight alignment, consistent cheek weld, and precise trigger control. Those skills transfer to any weapon system. Thompson was curious about her thoughts on modern shooting technology, rangefinders, ballistic computers, and advanced optics that promise to simplify the shooting process. Dorothy's perspective was both appreciative and cautionary. Technology can make good shooters more effective, she acknowledged, but it can't make poor shooters good. I've seen competitors who could hit anything with their computerized systems, but couldn't make a simple shot with basic equipment. Technology should supplement skill, not replace it. Chun asked about her advice for young shooters trying to develop similar skills. Dorothy's response was practical and encouraging, focusing on the importance of proper fundamentals and consistent practice. Start with the basics and master them completely before moving to advanced techniques, she advised. Dry fire practice at home, keep detailed shooting logs, and don't be afraid to seek instruction from experienced shooters. Most importantly, understand that precision shooting is a lifetime pursuit. There's always something new to learn. Rodriguez inquired about her competitive goals, curious about what motivated someone to continue competing at such a high level. Dorothy's answer revealed a passion for shooting that hadn't diminished with age. "I'm still trying to shoot the perfect group," she said with genuine enthusiasm. "After 43 years, I've come close many times, but I've never achieved that. Elusive perfect performance where every variable comes together perfectly. That goal keeps me motivated to continue improving." Williams asked about her proudest shooting achievement, expecting to hear about a major competition victory or record-setting performance. Dorothy's response surprised everyone. "My proudest achievement was teaching my granddaughter to outshoot her college rifle team," she said, her voice carrying obvious pride. "Watching her develop from a complete beginner to a skilled marksman reminded me why I fell in love with shooting in the first place." The conversation revealed Dorothy's role as a mentor and instructor, something that added another dimension to her already impressive resume. She'd taught dozens of students over the years, passing on not just technical skills, but also the discipline and mental approach that separated good shooters from great ones. "Teaching forces you to understand your own techniques more deeply," she explained. "When you have to explain why you do something, you have to examine your own methods critically. Some of my best insights into shooting have come from questions asked by students." Davis was curious about her thoughts on the future of precision shooting, wondering how the sport might evolve in coming years. Dorothy's perspective was optimistic, focusing on the continuing development of both technology and technique. "The sport will continue to evolve, but the fundamentals will remain constant," she predicted. "New equipment will push the boundaries of what's possible, but the basic skills, mental discipline, technical precision, and consistent practice will always be the foundation of success." As the afternoon session drew to a close, the Marines found themselves fundamentally changed by their encounter with Dorothy Patterson. They'd arrived as confident military marksmen and were leaving as humbled students, inspired by a demonstration of mastery that would influence their approach to shooting for years to come. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting golden light across the Quantico Range, Dorothy made one final proposal that would cement this day in the memories of everyone present. "Gentlemen, I'd like to end today with something special. A challenge that goes beyond individual shooting skills." Hayes looked intrigued, though somewhat wary after witnessing Dorothy's capabilities throughout the day. "What did you have in mind, Mrs. Patterson?" "Team shooting," Dorothy announced, beginning to set up a complex target array that required multiple shooting positions. "You Marines work together every day, coordinate your actions, and communicate under pressure. I'd like to see how that teamwork translates to precision shooting." The challenge she proposed was unlike anything the Marines had encountered in their training. 6 targets positioned at varying distances and angles, requiring coordinated engagement from different shooting positions. The twist was that communication would be essential. Wind conditions varied across the range, and successful hits required real-time information sharing between shooters. "Here's the catch," Dorothy continued, her eyes sparkling with competitive mischief. "I'll take on your entire unit by myself. Same targets, same time constraints, but I'll engage all 6 targets sequentially while you coordinate your simultaneous attack." Rodriguez felt his competitive spirit flare despite the day's humbling experiences. "Ma'am, that's 6 against 1. Even with your skills, coordinated teamwork should give us a significant advantage." Dorothy's smile was enigmatic as she began her final equipment check. "Marcus, shooting isn't always about individual skill. Sometimes it's about understanding the bigger picture, seeing connections that others miss. Today has been about precision and technique. This final challenge is about something different." What followed was a masterclass in tactical thinking that surprised even these experienced Marines. Dorothy had positioned herself at a central location that provided sight lines to all 6 targets. But more importantly, she'd selected a position that allowed her to observe wind conditions across the entire range simultaneously. While the Marines dispersed to their assigned positions, Dorothy remained stationary, using her vantage point to read environmental conditions that the separated Marines couldn't assess individually. Her approach was methodical and strategic, engaging targets in an order that compensated for changing wind patterns and lighting conditions. The Marines, despite their superior numbers and military coordination, found themselves struggling with the very teamwork that should have been their advantage. Communication delays, conflicting wind readings, and the pressure of simultaneous engagement affected their usual precision. Thompson, positioned at the rightmost shooting station, called out wind conditions that contradicted what Chin was experiencing. "On the left flank, I'm reading 15 miles per hour from the east," he reported through their communication system. "That can't be right," Chun responded, his voice carrying frustration. "I'm seeing gusts from the southeast at maybe 8 miles per hour." Dorothy, meanwhile, was engaging targets with systematic precision, her decades of experience allowing her to read microclimates and wind patterns that the separated Marines couldn't perceive. She understood that weather conditions weren't uniform across the range, and her central position allowed her to time her shots for optimal conditions at each target location. "Wind conditions are different at every target position," she explained. Between shots, her voice carrying the patience of a natural instructor. "You're reading conditions at your location, but that doesn't tell you what's happening at your target. I'm reading the conditions at each target individually." The revelation was eye-opening for the Marines. Military training had taught them to share information and coordinate actions, but Dorothy was demonstrating a level of environmental awareness that transcended their collective observations. Williams managed to score his first hit after adjusting for Dorothy's wind-reading advice. "How are you tracking conditions at 6 different locations simultaneously?" "Vegetation movement, mirage patterns, dust drift," Dorothy replied, scoring another perfect hit. "Every target location has indicators if you know how to read them. The trees behind Target 3 are barely moving, but the grass near Target 5 is showing significant wind drift." Davis began to understand the scope of Dorothy's expertise. "You're not just shooting targets, you're reading the entire battlefield environment." "Exactly," Dorothy confirmed, engaging her 4th target with mechanical precision. Precision shooting isn't just about individual marksmanship. At the highest levels, it's about understanding systems, how weather patterns interact, how lighting affects visibility, how terrain influences wind flow. Mitchell, who'd been struggling with his assigned target, asked for specific guidance. "Mrs. Patterson, what am I missing on Target 2?" I'm consistently shooting low and right. Dorothy paused her own shooting to observe conditions at Mitchell's target location. James, there's a thermal updraft creating a vertical wind component that you're not accounting for. The target is positioned where warm air from the concrete pad is rising and mixing with the prevailing wind. Hold 6 inches high and 2 inches left. Mitchell's next shot was a perfect hit, demonstrating the value of Dorothy's environmental reading skills. The Marines began to realize that they weren't just being outshot. They were being outcalculated by someone who understood the shooting environment at a level they'd never encountered. Hayes, observing the exercise from the command position, was amazed by Dorothy's ability to provide accurate wind calls for multiple locations, while simultaneously maintaining her own shooting performance. Mrs. Patterson, how do you process that much environmental information while shooting? 35 years of teaching high school students, Dorothy replied with a laugh, scoring another hit. When you've managed 20 teenagers in a chemistry lab, tracking 6 wind patterns becomes relatively simple. The humor didn't diminish the impressiveness of her performance. Dorothy was demonstrating cognitive abilities that seemed impossible for someone her age. Processing multiple streams of environmental data while maintaining the mental focus required for precision shooting. Chun managed to score his second hit after applying Dorothy's guidance, but he was struggling with the complexity of the information he was trying to process. This is overwhelming. How do you track all these variables without getting confused? Practice and prioritization, Dorothy explained, engaging her 5th target. You don't need to track everything, just the factors that matter most for your specific shot. Temperature affects bullet velocity, wind affects bullet drift, and lighting affects your ability to see clearly. Focus on what's immediately relevant. Rodriguez scored his final hit just as Dorothy was engaging her 6th and final target. Despite their best efforts and coordinated teamwork, the Marines had managed successful hits on only 4 of the 6 targets, while Dorothy had achieved perfect scores on all 6 of her targets. The silence that followed was profound. These Marines had begun the day confident in their shooting abilities and their tactical training. They were ending it with a completely new understanding of what was possible in precision shooting. Gentlemen, Dorothy said, beginning her final equipment cleanup, today wasn't about winning or losing. It was about learning. You're all excellent marksmen with solid fundamentals and good training. But precision shooting is a lifetime pursuit, and there's always room for improvement. Thompson spoke for the group when he said, Mrs. Patterson, this has been the most educational day of shooting in my career. We came here thinking we understood marksmanship, but you've shown us how much we still have to learn. Dorothy's expression was warm and encouraging. Kevin, the fact that you recognize how much there is to learn means you're already on the right path. Confidence is important in shooting, but humility is essential for improvement. Rodriguez asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Ma'am, would you be willing to return and work with our unit on advanced marksmanship techniques? I'd be delighted, Dorothy replied without hesitation. Teaching has always been one of my greatest pleasures, and working with motivated students like yourselves would be an honor. Hayes stepped forward with formal military bearing. Mrs. Patterson, on behalf of the United States Marine Corps and this unit specifically, I want to thank you for the demonstration you've provided today. We'll be talking about this for years to come. As Dorothy packed her equipment for the final time, the Marines gathered around her, eager to continue learning from someone who'd fundamentally changed their understanding of precision shooting. The day had begun with a simple competition and had evolved into something far more significant, a masterclass in shooting excellence delivered by someone whose skills transcended anything they'd previously encountered. Remember, Dorothy sighed, delivering her final words of instruction. Precision shooting isn't about competing against others. It's about competing against your own limitations and constantly striving to improve. Keep learning, keep practicing, and never stop asking questions. The 78-year-old woman who had outshot an entire Marine unit walked slowly toward her car, leaving behind a group of warriors who would never again assume they understood the limits of human marksmanship. Dorothy Patterson had proven that true. Mastery comes not from youth or strength, but from decades of dedicated practice, continuous learning, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. As her car disappeared down the road leading away from Quantico, the Marines stood in respectful silence, each contemplating the lessons they'd learned and the shooting goals they would now pursue with renewed dedication and humility. 3 weeks after Dorothy Patterson's legendary visit to Quantico, the ripple effects of that extraordinary day continued to spread throughout the Marine Corps' shooting community. Word of the 78-year-old woman who had systematically outshot an entire unit of elite marksmen had traveled through military channels with the speed and persistence of a determined rumor, growing more impressive with each retelling. Rodriguez found himself fielding calls from shooting instructors across multiple bases, each wanting to verify the details of Dorothy's performance. The story had taken on almost mythical proportions, with some versions claiming she'd shot perfect scores at impossible distances while blindfolded and standing on one foot. "Sir, I need to set the record straight," Rodriguez explained to Colonel Patricia Hawkins, the base's senior marksmanship coordinator, during a formal debriefing. Mrs. Patterson didn't perform magic. What she demonstrated was the result of 43 years of dedicated practice and an understanding of shooting fundamentals that goes far beyond what most of us ever achieve. Colonel Hawkins leaned back in her chair, studying the detailed report Rodriguez had prepared. "Sergeant, I've been shooting competitively for 22 years. I've seen exceptional marksmanship before. But what you're describing suggests a level of consistency that challenges everything we think we know about human performance limitations." The conversation that followed revealed how Dorothy's visit had fundamentally altered the unit's approach to marksmanship training. Mitchell had begun keeping detailed shooting logs similar to Dorothy's, tracking environmental conditions and performance variables with scientific precision. Thompson was experimenting with iron sight training to improve his fundamental skills. Sean had started studying ballistics with an intensity that surprised his fellow Marines. "The woman changed our entire perspective on what's possible," Rodriguez continued. "We thought we were good marksmen, but she showed us the difference between being competent and being masterful." Meanwhile, Dorothy had returned to her normal routine in rural Virginia, seemingly unaware of the legend she'd created. Her days continued with the same disciplined practice schedule she'd maintained for decades: morning sessions at her private range, meticulous equipment maintenance, and detailed analysis of every shot fired. But something had changed. The phone calls had started almost immediately after her Quantico visit. Shooting instructors from civilian clubs, military trainers, and competitive shooters from across the country were reaching out, desperate to learn from someone whose skills had achieved legendary status overnight. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Master Sergeant Jennifer Walsh from Camp Pendleton," came one typical call. "I've heard about your demonstration at Quantico, and I'm wondering if you'd consider conducting a marksmanship clinic for our advanced shooting team." Dorothy's calendar, previously filled only with local competitions and hunting seasons, began filling with teaching opportunities that would have overwhelmed someone half her age. Yet she approached each invitation with the same methodical consideration. She applied to everything else. "I'm flattered by the interest," she would respond to each caller, "but I need to understand what you're hoping to achieve." Technical instruction is different from competitive coaching, which is different from tactical training. Each requires a specific approach. The distinction was important to Dorothy. Her Quantico demonstration had showcased precision shooting skills, but she understood that different shooting disciplines required different techniques and mindsets. Military tactical shooting prioritized speed and effectiveness under combat conditions. Competitive shooting emphasized absolute precision, under controlled circumstances. Hunting required adaptability and first-shot accuracy under unpredictable conditions. Back at Quantico, the Marines were discovering how Dorothy's influence extended beyond shooting technique into broader questions of skill development and mastery. Hayes had initiated formal research into training methodologies, curious about how civilian competitive shooters achieved precision levels that seemed to exceed military standards. What we're finding, Hayes explained to a gathering of shooting instructors from multiple bases, is that military training optimizes for combat effectiveness, while competitive shooting optimizes for absolute precision. Both approaches are valid, but they produce different skill sets. The research was revealing fascinating differences in training philosophy. Military marksmen trained for speed, reliability, and effectiveness under stress. They needed to hit center mass consistently rather than achieving perfect precision. Competitive shooters like Dorothy trained for absolute accuracy, spending thousands of hours perfecting techniques that military shooters rarely considered. Williams had become particularly interested in Dorothy's approach to mental preparation, implementing meditation and visualization techniques that were uncommon in military training. She talked about shooting being 90% mental, he explained to his fellow Marines. I never understood what that meant until I started paying attention to my psychological state during shooting. The mental aspects of Dorothy's performance were perhaps the most intriguing element of her demonstration. Her ability to maintain focus across multiple shooting disciplines, to process complex environmental information while maintaining precision, and to perform consistently under the pressure of skeptical observation, suggested cognitive abilities that defied conventional understanding of aging and performance. Dr. Sarah Chun, a sports psychologist who'd heard about Dorothy's performance, reached out to study the mental aspects of her shooting. What Mrs. Patterson demonstrated challenges our understanding of cognitive peak performance, Dr. Chun explained. Most research suggests that complex motor skills decline with age, but her performance indicates that experience and practice can compensate for physiological changes in remarkable ways. Dorothy agreed to participate in Dr. Chun's research, curious about the scientific aspects of her own performance. The studies revealed cognitive processing speeds and visual perception abilities that were extraordinary for someone her age. But more importantly, they showed decision-making patterns that reflected decades of accumulated expertise. The most interesting finding, Dr. Chun reported, is how Mrs. Patterson processes environmental information. Where younger shooters try to consciously analyze multiple variables, she's developed pattern recognition that allows her to assess conditions almost instantaneously. The research confirmed what Dorothy had tried to explain to the Marines, that true expertise wasn't about superior physical capabilities, but about the automatic processing of information that came from decades of deliberate practice. 6 months after the Quantico demonstration, Dorothy received an invitation that surprised even her. The National Shooting Sports Foundation wanted to recognize her contribution to marksmanship education with their Lifetime Achievement Award, an honor previously reserved for Olympic champions and industry pioneers. Mrs. Patterson, the foundation president, explained during his presentation speech, "Your demonstration at Quantico reminded us that mastery isn't about age or technology, it's about dedication, practice, and the continuous pursuit of excellence. You've inspired a new generation of shooters to pursue precision as a lifelong journey." Dorothy's acceptance speech was characteristically humble and focused on the future rather than her own achievements. "Shooting has given me 70 years of joy, challenge, and continuous learning. If my small demonstration has inspired others to pursue their own excellence, then I've achieved more than any competition victory could provide." The ceremony included testimonials from the Quantico Marines, each describing how Dorothy's visit had changed their approach to shooting. Rodriguez spoke about the importance of fundamental skills. Mitchell discussed the value of detailed practice logs, and Thompson emphasized the mental aspects of precision shooting. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Dorothy announced her next project, a comprehensive training program that would bring together military marksmen, competitive shooters, and hunting enthusiasts to share techniques and knowledge across traditional boundaries. Too often, different shooting communities operate in isolation, Dorothy explained. Military shooters, competitive marksmen, and hunters all have valuable knowledge to share. My goal is to create opportunities for that cross-pollination of ideas. The program, which would become known as the Patterson Precision Institute, represented Dorothy's vision of shooting education that transcended traditional categories. It would bring together the tactical skills of military marksmen, the precision techniques of competitive shooters, and the adaptability required for hunting. As Dorothy concluded her acceptance speech, looking out at an audience that included Olympic champions, military leaders, and industry pioneers, she reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought her to this moment. A routine visit to a military base had evolved into a movement that was changing how people thought about marksmanship and skill development. The most important lesson I've learned, Dorothy said in closing, is that mastery is never complete. Every shot teaches you something new. Every challenge reveals areas for improvement, and every student helps you understand your own techniques more deeply. At 78, I'm still learning, still improving, and still excited about tomorrow's shooting session. The standing ovation that followed lasted several minutes, but Dorothy's thoughts were already turning to her next practice session, her next student, and her next opportunity to push the boundaries of what was possible in precision shooting. The 78-year-old woman who had outshot the Marines had become something more than a skilled marksman. She had become an inspiration for anyone pursuing excellence in any field. The legend of Dorothy Patterson would continue to grow. But the woman herself remained focused on the simple truth that had guided her. For 7 decades, there was always another shot to take, another skill to master, and another student to teach. 1 year later, the Patterson Precision Institute had become a reality that exceeded even Dorothy's ambitious vision. The facility, built on 200 acres of Virginia countryside, featured multiple shooting ranges designed to accommodate every discipline from precision rifle to tactical scenarios. What made it unique wasn't just the physical infrastructure, but the revolutionary approach to cross-training that Dorothy had pioneered. Major Lisa Rodriguez, who had transferred from active duty to help develop the Institute's curriculum, marveled at the diversity of students. We have Navy SEALs training alongside Olympic hopefuls, police snipers learning from competitive bencherous shooters, and hunters picking up techniques from military precision marksmen. Dorothy created something that didn't exist before. The morning briefings at the Institute had become legendary in their own right. Dorothy, now 79 but showing no signs of diminished capability, would address groups of up to 40 students representing every branch of military service, law enforcement agencies, and civilian competitive shooters. Excellence recognizes no boundaries, she would begin each session, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent a lifetime proving her words through action. A Navy SEAL's understanding of environmental conditions can improve a competitive shooter's wind reading skills. A bencherist competitor's loading techniques can enhance a police sniper's long-range accuracy. We're here to break down the artificial barriers between shooting disciplines. The curriculum Dorothy developed challenged conventional training wisdom by integrating techniques from seemingly incompatible shooting sports. Students found themselves learning bencherist precision techniques in the morning, tactical movement, shooting in the afternoon, and hunting scenario training in the evening. Captain Michael Torres, an Army sniper instructor with 15 years of experience, discovered that Dorothy's approach revealed gaps in his own knowledge that he'd never recognized. I thought I understood long-range shooting until I started learning from competitive FA-class shooters. Their understanding of ballistics and wind reading goes far beyond what military training covers. The Institute's research component had attracted attention from universities studying human performance and skill acquisition. Dr. Jennifer Walsh from Stanford's Motor Learning Laboratory had established a permanent research station at the facility, documenting how Dorothy's teaching methods accelerated skill development across different age groups and experience levels. What were observing challenges traditional models of expertise development? Dr. Walsh explained to a gathering of cognitive scientists. Mrs. Patterson's students are achieving precision levels in months that typically require years of traditional training. Her methodology seems to accelerate the unconscious competence phase of skill acquisition. The research was revealing that Dorothy's emphasis on understanding principles rather than memorizing techniques created adaptable expertise that transferred between shooting disciplines more effectively than traditional specialized training. Students who learned her integrated approach could modify their techniques for new situations rather than starting from scratch. Detective Sarah Thompson from the Los Angeles Police Department had arrived at the Institute with 12 years of tactical shooting experience, confident in her abilities. 3 months later, she was questioning everything she thought she knew about precision shooting. Dorothy doesn't just teach you how to shoot, Thompson explained to her fellow officers. Upon returning to duty, she teaches you how to think about shooting. The difference is profound. I'm making shots now that would have been impossible for me 6 months ago. The Institute's impact extended beyond individual skill development into broader questions about training methodology and human performance optimization. Military training commands were studying Dorothy's curriculum to understand how civilian competitive shooting techniques could enhance tactical effectiveness. Colonel James Patterson, No. Relation to Dorothy, director of the Army Marksmanship Unit, had spent considerable time observing the Institute's operations. What Mrs. Patterson has created represents a paradigm shift in how we think about marksmanship training. She's proven that the artificial divisions between shooting disciplines limit our potential for excellence. The success stories emerging from the Institute were becoming legendary throughout the shooting community. Master Sergeant Kevin Davis, who had struggled with long-range precision throughout his military career, achieved expert marksman status within 6 months of studying Dorothy's techniques. I spent 15 years thinking I wasn't naturally gifted for precision shooting, Davis admitted during a testimonial video. Dorothy showed me that precision isn't about natural talent. It's about understanding the science of shooting and applying it consistently. The Institute's hunting program had attracted particular attention from wildlife management agencies interested in improving hunter education. Dorothy's approach emphasized ethical shot placement and environmental responsibility alongside marksmanship skills. Hunting isn't just about being able to hit a target, Dorothy explained to a group of new hunters during their orientation session. It's about understanding animal behavior, reading environmental conditions, and making ethical decisions under field conditions. A true hunter combines marksmanship skills with ecological knowledge and moral responsibility. The advanced courses at the Institute pushed even experienced shooters to their limits. The Extreme Environment Program, conducted in partnership with military survival schools, taught precision shooting under conditions that tested both technical skills and mental resilience. Lieutenant Commander Jessica Martinez, a naval special warfare operator, found the extreme environment training more challenging than her military qualification courses. Dorothy's program doesn't just test your shooting skills, it tests your ability to maintain precision under physical and psychological stress that goes beyond anything I experienced in the teams. The international recognition of Dorothy's achievements had attracted students from 37 countries, creating a global network of shooters trained in her integrated methodology. The cultural exchange that resulted had produced innovations that surprised even Dorothy. A Finnish biathlete taught us breathing techniques that improve stability during rapid position changes, Dorothy recounted during one of her evening seminars. A British target shooter shared focusing methods that enhanced precision under time pressure. Every student brings knowledge that enriches our collective understanding. The Institute's research library had grown to include shooting manuscripts and training documents from around the world, creating what many considered the most comprehensive collection of marksmanship knowledge ever assembled. Dorothy spent hours each week reviewing historical training methods, looking for techniques that could be adapted for modern application. Shooting wisdom isn't new, she would remind students who were impressed by her innovations. Most of what I teach represents the rediscovery and integration of techniques that have been known for decades or centuries. My contribution is organizing this knowledge into a coherent system. The evening seminars at the Institute had become as valuable as the practical training sessions. Dorothy would discuss the philosophical aspects of marksmanship, the psychology of skill development, and the ethical responsibilities that came with shooting expertise. Mastery brings responsibility, she would tell advanced students nearing graduation. The skills you've developed here represent trust. Society expects excellence, ethical behavior, and continuous learning from those who possess advanced capabilities. The testimonials from Institute graduates read like a collection of transformation stories. Police officers reporting dramatically improved qualification scores, military snipers achieving previously impossible precision standards, and competitive shooters breaking personal records that had stood for years. Frank Williams, a competitive shooter who had plateaued after 20 years of traditional training, achieved a perfect score at the national championships 6 months after completing Dorothy's program. I thought I had reached my genetic limits, he explained. Dorothy showed me that what I thought were limits were just the boundaries of my previous understanding. The Institute's influence had begun reshaping shooting instruction throughout the country. Traditional training programs were incorporating elements of Dorothy's methodology, and shooting schools were sending instructors to study her techniques. Dr. Robert Chun, a biomechanics researcher studying motor learning, had documented measurable improvements in students' shooting performance that exceeded typical learning curves. Mrs. Patterson's students achieve consistency levels that normally require years of practice in a matter of months. Her teaching methodology appears to accelerate the neurological adaptations associated with expertise development. As Dorothy approached her 80th birthday, showing no signs of slowing down, the Institute continued expanding its programs and influence. The waiting list for advanced courses extended 18 months, and corporations were sending executives to study her approaches to skill development and performance optimization. What we've learned about shooting excellence applies to any field requiring precision and consistency, Dorothy explained to a group of business leaders attending a leadership development seminar. The principles of deliberate practice, environmental awareness, and mental preparation that create shooting mastery are the same principles that create excellence in any domain. The woman who had walked onto a Marine base 3 years earlier as an unknown civilian challenger had become one of the most influential figures in modern marksmanship instruction. Yet Dorothy remained focused on the fundamentals that had guided her throughout her journey: continuous learning, precise execution, and the generous sharing of knowledge with anyone willing to learn. The legacy of that extraordinary day at Quantico continued to unfold in ways no one could have predicted, inspiring excellence that extended far beyond the shooting sports into broader questions about human potential and the pursuit of mastery at any age. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.